This track has the 3 best tutorials from Itsec 2023 as selected by the tutorial board, and they're competing for the Best Tutorial Award, which will be awarded on Thursday night. As a reminder, please silence your cell phones and don't use any flash photography, and please don't take any video. The session is being recorded as a video that'll be available after the show. I will also be handing out feedback forms. We don't have enough for everyone probably, but if you use the Itsec app, you can also complete a feedback form online. And you can download the Itsec app that helps you navigate the show throughout the week. Our next tutorial is by Dr. Kevin Holm, and the title is Beyond the Screams, Modeling and Simulation, Anatomy and Decomposition of a Contemporary Ride System Attraction. Kevin is on the tutorial board, and he has been nominated in the past as well for Best Tutorial on various topics. He received his PhD from the University of Buffalo, specializing in multidisciplinary analysis and optimization of complex systems. Currently, he's the program manager for the Stephen Still Institute for Sustainable Transportation and Logistics and provides oversight for its motion simulation laboratory. Dr. Holm's current areas of focus include applied modeling and simulation, simulation science, transportation and vehicle modeling and simulation, game-based approaches in engineering education, human factors, and advanced air mobility. He is also a certified modeling and simulation professional, CMSP. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kevin Holm.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you all for coming today. It's great to be here at Itsec. It's always an annual highlight for me to attend this conference. And historically, Monday is also my favorite day during the week because tutorials are so rich in content. It's nice to be able to branch out and learn more about topics in a 90-minute format. So I'm very grateful to be part of the program today. I'm grateful for all of you coming for your attendance this morning. This morning, I talked a little bit about kind of the primary reason why I'm here. I was in another tutorial session talking about transportation. As Lee mentioned, that's kind of my primary vocation. But this tutorial is, as the title implies, a little bit more for fun. So I hope you enjoy it. But one thing we want to explore today is that it's not just fun and games, but there is actually a strong coupling between what's being done currently in contemporary entertainment applications and in more serious-minded training applications as well. So we're going to spend the next 90 minutes or so not going behind the scenes, but behind the screams to look at the anatomy and decomposition of a contemporary ride system attraction. This one happens to be regional to this area, as we'll soon see here in Orlando. So by way of an agenda, I'll start off with an introduction, really go into some formal learning objectives, as advised by Bloom's taxonomy. I'll spend 10 or so minutes going into some of the broader impacts of why I'm doing this here. Again, not necessarily just fun and games, but we want to see kind of how the entertainment industries and the more serious-minded training industries, including military, are kind of constantly have this coupling. They're constantly borrowing from each other, and there is a great deal of synergy there. I'll talk briefly about the park experience that encompasses this particular attraction, really to set the stage for, again, going behind the screams to look at this Star Wars-themed attraction that I was able to experience a year ago. I had heard so many great things about it and was absolutely not disappointed. It happens to be called Rise of the Resistance. We'll talk about the path ahead. Of course, we want to come here each year at Itsec, go to the academic portion, go out on the exhibition floor, and learn what's going on today to inform our future pathways. So we want to spend a good few minutes doing that. I'll spend a few minutes hopefully confirming my primary learning objectives, a few key acknowledgments for those community of interests that, whether they know it or not, really helped me comprise and put this tutorial together, and finally a bibliography at the end. So just so any of you know, you all will have access to this tutorial and every tutorial here at Itsec 2023 digitally. Every slide in this slide deck, in the top right corner, I put the primary reference or references, plural, that compose that slide, which then, if you come back to the bibliography at the very end, will give you the sources for that reference material. We'll try to save at least 10, if not 15 full minutes at the very end for questions and additional dialogue. So this year at Itsec 2023, our conference themes are sustaining a global force in a digital world. And whenever I'm so fortunate to be at the podium here at Itsec, I always, mainly as a thought exercise, just try to think about how what I'm talking about is pertinent to and relevant to this year's themes. So I would argue there is a lot of technological overlap with what I'm going to be talking about today with modeling and simulation and with various technologies here at Itsec more broadly. So a few notions that I'll just quickly touch on. Past is always prologue. So trying to explore the technological link, pun fully intended, to the entertainment sector. Number 2, training needs. We always hear about training here at Itsec. It's such a prevalent theme, so important for all of us in whatever our respective vocations may be, but trying to acquire competencies through the application of the state of the art. Finally, more current priorities, investing, latching onto the term digital in the conference themes this year, investigating how digital technologies can better help us to support global readiness. So last year at Itsec, after Itsec, for the first time in a number of years, I was able to go out and kind of enjoy Orlando. Of course, for all of my life, I've enjoyed attractions, roller coasters, amusement parks. I have my mother and father to thank for introducing me to these great things. I left Itsec 2022 feeling inspired, as I always do, and started to think about, well, what am I going to try to do next year? So I did some field research. I went to the Disney and Universal parks. Of course, I tell my employer, I've got to do these things. Sorry, keep me down there for a few extra days after the conference. And I got on this attraction that people on the internet were saying, hey, you got to see this thing, you got to ride this thing. And I rode it 3 times and had 3 seemingly different experiences. So not only was I not disappointed by this particular attraction, but the engineer in me, the nerd in me, if you will, walked away saying so many times throughout the end-to-end ride experience, how did they do that? And specifically, how did they balance all the technological advances that we're going to be talking through today with the operational efficiency of the ride? Because of course, at parks like Disney, Universal, and all their various competitors across the globe, these attractions need to be people eaters. You need to get people from point A to point B very quickly. Disney is only getting more popular each and every year. So with that, let's bridge into our learning objectives. Number 1, we want to describe the lasting contributions of the Link trainer to the M&S community. I told you that pun was not intended, but we want to look at linkages or couplings throughout this tutorial and recognize the link, the ongoing link that dates back almost a century, as we're about to see, between training simulation and various amusement attractions. Then we want to apply some knowledge of park experience, again, trying to look at optimizing thrills with operational efficiency. As with any modeling problem in life, there's usually a tug of war at play. There's a yin-yang, if you will, and certainly in this case, that's no exception. We're going to spend a lot of our time, probably most of our time today, analyzing the various technological nuances, the M&S nuances specifically, with this specific state-of-the-art ride attraction. And then, of course, we want to end by evaluating future opportunities. We want to take what we learned, look to the future to try to see ways that we can sustain and expand various ride technologies in this increasingly digital world, but of course being mindful of this coupling that I keep talking about to other serious-minded training sectors with relevance to models and simulations. Okay, but going back in time, I'm sure I'm presenting on this slide something that all of you, most of you are familiar with. Going back to the origins of flight simulation training, the Link trainer designed in 1929, so going on 95 years ago now. Binghamton, New York is where this contraption originated, about 3.5 hours drive from where I live. nicknamed the blue box for reasons which I'm sure are obvious from all of you looking at the images on the side of this slide, but this is widely regarded as the very first flight trainer used to train pilots to fly by their instruments. If you're like me and you see the kind of panels in the hallways here at Itsec that show the history of M&S, you know, the very first panel on the left side of that display is the link trainer. So really it served as the origins of Itsec as we know it today. But many advantages of the link trainer and all those flight simulator trainers that have come since that time. Safety, of course, being number one always. Repeatability, reliability, robustness, high fidelity training. You know, we look back at this now almost with a bit of a comical eye, but considering that it wasn't the real thing, it was effective at doing its job for the time. It had an exterior that looked like a plane. It had a cockpit with controls and dials and gauges, and this hexapod-looking thing that you sat on that gave you basic motion cues to feel like you were, you know, taking off and landing. So that's where the link trainer came from, and obvious relevance to inter-services with the link trainer. Military used this technology to meet an existing need, that is, improved training of warfighters. But, and this really kind of bridges and segues into one of the primary seeds that I want to plant today, that the military and entertainment industries have long been complementary. So if you go on Google and you find the link trainer patent from 1930, it was designed primarily, not surprisingly, as a flight trainer. But specifically and explicitly in the patents, you can see that it was co-designed as an amusement device. So this is a prophetic concept to think about, that all those years ago, Edwin Link and his team looked at this contraption that they were building and said, hey, we're going to revolutionize flight training, but at the same time, this thing could be a hit on the carnival circuit. You know, let families go in there, pay a dime, and, you know, experience what it feels like to fly an airplane, which many people in their lifetime won't have access to. So the entertainment industry has been effective, I would argue, at adapting military instantiations of M&S to create a need to attract its core audience. So closer to modern times, looking at simulator ride attractions. You know, perhaps not surprisingly, Disney were one of the first players in this arena, formally defined for those of you who may not know. Participants shown a movie while they're in some vehicle or in some seating contraption or a building that's moving to correspond to the action on the screen. So in the mid to late 80s, again, Disney were one of the originators to do this on somewhat of a larger scale, and they began to transform, you know, dated technologies for the time to allow guests to essentially ride the movies. And one of the first examples of that, which I'm slightly embarrassed to say I'm an enthusiast, but I've never been on this, Star Tours, which was themed, of course, after the Star Wars series of films that began in the late 1970s. I've heard great things about this attraction and, of course, hope to ride it one day. But in the early 1990s, 1991 to be exact, a good thing started to happen for this industry. And that, of course, was competition. So we started to see Universal Studios emerging with its own bigger and better concepts. So in 1991, on the bottom part of this slide, we saw the emergence of the Back to the Future attraction. So a massive show building with a big curved screen, all these DeLorean vehicles. Of course, this movie was popular when I was in high school, and you got to experience 5 minutes with Doc and Marty McFly and all the characters from the Back to the Future mythology. But many advantages to these types of implementations in the entertainment sector. High capacity, indoors, which down here in Florida is so essential for climate control, less space consuming than physical attractions, large attractions like roller coasters and the like. And of course, these are reprogrammable and upgradable to a degree. So in 2007, Back to the Future was kind of no longer the new thing anymore. That show building and some of the hardware and software was upgraded to form and comprise the Simpsons attraction. And now, 15 years on from that, I'm hearing that Simpsons is no longer the hot thing, and that attraction is being upgraded to whatever generation 3 of this attraction might be. But again, the focus for this tutorial is to look at innovative ride elements that can be leveraged for more serious-minded training. Of course, that's why many of us, most of us, are here at Itsec this year and every year. So how has the military sector borrowed from the entertainment industry and vice versa? What's that linkage? What's that coupling that I alluded to a few slides back? So to set the tone for what we really want to talk about today with the feature attraction, let's quickly look at 3 recent examples of this: linear motors, squinching, and simulated gravity. So the former, kind of looking at the right to begin, in the 1990s, we started to see unconventional ways to make roller coasters go fast and go high. So you see that primitive, it's kind of an older video now that used linear induction motors, or LIMs, to launch the first 100-mile-per-hour roller coaster, which you see a picture of down here on the lower right. And on the left here, you see somewhat of a comical video of adapting, sort of launching this thing out into the sea here, but a prototypical launch of maybe aircraft carriers adapting these types of technologies to launch future aircraft. So rather than some kind of mechanical catapult or a steam piston, adapting what was used in entertainment in the 90s to more recent contemporary and so-called serious-minded applications. Another example, I found this a few years ago. This was something that was patented by Universal Studios, which is formally called dynamic image distortion compensation. So the whole idea is when you're on many of these moving simulators in a show building, you're in a ride vehicle that's passing by, laterally passing by, or vertically passing by static screens. So if you're looking at that screen from an oblique angle, whatever image is going to be projected on that screen is going to look and appear oblique. So unless you adjust that image, to sort of move in concert with the motion of the accompanying ride vehicle, it's going to look distorted. So Universal, in one of their attractions, came up with squinching, which is formally defined as real-time transformations based on the camera, the projector and surface, and of course the viewer orientations and position. So that video, I think, that rendering did a nice job of kind of showing exactly how that's done. And in combing through recent patent imagery, I found similar implementations that are actually being used or soon will be used in the transportation industry. So a couple of images, patent images that are shown here on the bottom of the slide to show adaptations for automobile vision systems. So imagine you're approaching a traffic accident or a construction zone, and maybe in some kind of future augmented reality on your windshield, you see a depiction that sort of guides you to a certain lane or guides you away from some area of concern that's on the roadway using some kind of a visual system. And in this implementation, the same problems are going to manifest. As we drive closer, our field of view is constantly changing dynamically. So that imagery that's painted in augmented space is going to have to adjust for our field of view. It's going to have to squinch, if you will. So this is me kind of surmising how those technologies from entertainment might be used in future transportation. This example is kind of the other way around, where the entertainment industry borrowed from existing aeronautical technologies. So this is rotational simulated gravity. Any of you from the aerospace industry, of course, astronauts train using this centrifuge, this massive room where you spin astronauts in training very quickly, again, trying to emulate extreme accelerations that they might encounter during space missions. And amusement park rides have become so complex and so sophisticated that they're now borrowing these types of technologies for NASA to increase the thrill factor. So similar technologies, I'm talking about Mission Space, specifically at Epcot, which is now, I can't believe, a 20-year-old attraction. But you get in these capsules, you tilt backwards to give you that sense that you're being launched somewhere. You look at the screen that's in front of you that's selling the imagery that you're launching up into space, and the passengers, without knowing it, are in a centrifuge, are actually in a room, and this whole room is spinning, of course, multiple capsules at the same time because you're trying to maximize throughput, and a classic example of this sort of link, this coupling that I alluded to earlier. But let's bring things closer to what we really want to focus on today, and the park experience of the host park that hosts the attraction that I want to talk about today. Of course, that's Walt Disney World, Hollywood Studios to be much more specific, which is a 135-acre park. It's a big place dedicated to the imagined worlds from film, TV, music, the so-called golden age of Hollywood. It is, for those of you who may not know, the third of 4 Disney parks that are in this area. Opened in 1989 after Magic Kingdom and Epcot, but of course before Animal Kingdom. A huge primary, one of the primary tourism anchors here in Orlando. Annual attendance just before the pandemic, 11.5 million and rising. I would bet that here we are 4 years later, even though we've only recently come out of the pandemic, I would bet that the attendance figures this year are going to go above and beyond those thresholds. Last year ranked number 4 in theme park attendance, so it's clearly one of the most popular entertainment meccas in the world, and due to no small part to a feature element that opened in 2019, just before the pandemic, a dedicated Star Wars themed area. So I'm sure most people in this room know what Star Wars is. Certainly our kids, our grandkids know what it is, but Galaxy's Edge opened in 2019, 14 full acres featuring attractions, restaurants, entertainment, you name it. You walk in this world like that video is kind of showing you on the bottom there, and you're in a Star Wars-like village. Popularity at an extreme in 2019. That's an image from right when it was opening. It's just crazy. But it was announced in 2015. Construction began a year later, and then this Galaxy's Edge world opened 3 years after that. Occupied by creatures everywhere from the Star Wars mythology. I was walking around last year looking at the attractions, all the various simulators, entertainment, concession stands, inside, outside. It's all part of the storytelling element. And this is a theme we're going to come back to a lot in this tutorial, because immediately I started to think of native parallels to serious games, which I sometimes do in my actual job. Not when I'm having fun here standing at the podium before you. But game designer theorists will always tell you that storytelling is so important. If you can sell the story of the game that participants are experiencing, they're going to be engaged, they're going to be part of it, they're going to care about the outcomes. So this is essential. But Galaxy's Edge brought Star Wars to life in a manner that was truly multi-sensory in every sense of the word. Physical, virtual. So of course, I'm bridging the gap to native parallels to our LVC, Live Virtual Constructive Taxonomy. We're going to be talking about this again at various points throughout in greater detail. When the park opened, a major simulator attraction opened up along with it, and that was called Smuggler's Run. So I want to just go over some basics really to set the stage for the main simulator component that we want to talk about today. But this was a more classical hexapod, motion-based ride simulator experience on the Millennium Falcon. For those, I'm sure everyone knows, but this was Han Solo's spaceship. I was born in the early 70s, so of course I was a big Star Wars fan back in the day. So this was a great thrill to experience. But when passengers enter the cockpit, you're actually entering, maybe without knowing it, a mini theater that creates this simulated experience. And we're going to talk about this in brief. Interactivity through pilot control, you all have roles as part of the story when you get in this thing, and the outcome of the ride experience is somewhat open-ended, which of course makes for a good time for the many Disney enthusiasts who re-ride this thing tens or hundreds of times. But lower left here shows you the outside. I mean, it's like looking at the actual spaceship. Middle here on the bottom shows you there's 6 seats on board. It looks like you're looking through the actual glass, and some patent imagery that's publicly available that shows you a little bit behind the scenes or behind the screens, as it were, on how this thing works in delivering thrills and efficiency at the same time. So a few tech specs. That video up top shows you a glimpse of sitting in the cockpit. I wrote it once, and it was very thrilling, a great instantiation of modern-day hexapod-based simulation, but it operates on a 6-DOF hexapod steward platform, if you will. For those of you who may not know what those are, you're going to see them on the exhibition floor throughout the week, and images on the bottom of this slide kind of paint a better picture than me waving my hands. But forward surround screen projection cones that envelop you, all installed on giant turntables that you may have seen on the previous slide, each with multiple passenger pods. So again, participant roles, there's interactivity during the ride, and they vary based on the row number that you're sitting in. So there's pilots in row 1, gunners in row 2, and I was one of the unlucky engineers in row 3. So one observation I had was when you're a pilot in the front row, where I hoped to be, you're looking ahead, of course, at the action that's in front of you, and you're interacting with controls and dictating your mission also in front of you. And I think this is good simulator practice. Whereas I, in the back row, I'm looking ahead at my visuals. The motion cueing is geared for me looking forward, but I was looking sideways at, pressing buttons when I was prompted to do so. So looking this way and then looking back is, I would argue, not great. A little bit of simulator maladaptation there. So, of course, it's easy for me to throw stones. Disney's raking in the dollars, getting the last laugh, but hey, my observation, mild complaint. Let's talk quickly about logistics. 7 capsules, 6 riders per, 4 turntables. So 168 riders, 1,800 persons per hour, which is pretty good capacity. Like I said earlier, you've got to balance thrills and efficiency. At Disney, more importantly than anywhere, these attractions have to be people eaters. But I couldn't help but notice the ride mechanics when I was getting on and off this ride. And what you're seeing here are blueprint images created by the enthusiast community at Disney. So I thought I was going to have to surmise this or talk about how I thought it all worked, but really the Disney community already did a lot of the heavy lifting for me. So a quick shout out to them. The queue is constantly moving. I don't know about any of you, but when I'm in a traffic jam, I would rather go 5 miles per hour the whole time than stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. And when I'm waiting in line for one of these attractions, I kind of feel the same way. So it was kind of nice how they did that. You don't encounter other passengers. So I thought that was interesting that when I was getting on, I wasn't bumping shoulders with people who were getting off the attraction. And the exit area can be different after each ride. I didn't notice that on this one, although I did on the one that I'm about to talk to. So same deal, and a lot of these blueprint images that are painted here kind of show you the magic behind the scenes behind the screens, if you will, about how this was done. But Smuggler's Run was the appetizer. Rise of the Resistance was easily and by far the main course. I had heard great things about this attraction as a simulator enthusiast, and I was not let down. It is, in many senses of the word, a marquee, world's first simulator attraction. Of course, really was the primary impetus for me doing this tutorial. But I want to take a moment of pause right now, critical moment of pause, to think back to our learning objectives and really recall our purpose here today, anatomy and decomposition of this attraction. We want to think back and relate back to the concept of the origins of this attraction, from whence it came all those years ago with the Link Trainer. Think about couplings between entertainment and military, serious-minded training. That's why we're here. That's what we want to learn a little bit more about, while optimizing thrills and efficiency. Again, that tug of war that many simulator implementations will often face. We're going to spend a lot of time today, again, on primary M&S innovations, some of those details, how does it work, thinking about M&S, LVC, and finally, looking at today with an eye towards the future and looking at future extensibility opportunities. So a few primary features and statistics for those of you who are interested in these things, as I am. 18 show areas comprise this entire ride experience end to end. Blueprints that are forthcoming, similar to the ones that I just showed you, will offer additional depth and detail. 38 ride vehicles in this attraction. I think they each hold 7, 3 in the front row, 4 in the back row. Of course, I got stuck in the back row again, mild complaint. Every time. I rode it 3 times. What are the odds? Any statisticians out there? 3 times in the back row. 1 in 8, I think. Is that right, Roger? Okay, 1 in 8. 36 of which occupy the show space, or should I say show volume, simultaneously. Many ride system innovations, we're going to take a close look at the 4 primary ride systems that operate seamlessly that I was extremely impressed by. all forming this one epic experience. And back to this notion of storytelling. The ride structure I thought was so impressive, and there's 3 acts that comprise it. Number 1 are the cave systems of planet Batu, Star Wars thing for those of you who don't know, during which you experience the queuing, the pre-show elements. You segue into Act 2, which is your ascent into space. You of course have to have an encounter with the bad guys. You get in this intersystem transport ship or ITS shuttle, and that's the first of the ride systems we want to talk about, which actually, without you knowing it, is a turntable simulator. Finally, Act 3 is the escape. You get away from the bad guys, you want to come back to the ground where you started, the escape from the Star Destroyer, which of course is Darth Vader's spaceship. Primary simulator segments 2, 3, and 4 will be discussed here. Trackless motion, an elevator and freefall system, and a full motion, highly immersive curved screen simulator. The scale and scope of this attraction is amazing. It's unbelievable how far since the Link Trainer, all those years ago, these types of things have come. So I came to learn that the ride building is 165,000 square feet in size, encompassing 2 floors. So you start on the bottom, you go to the 2nd floor, come back down. That sounded like a big number to me, but I wanted to give myself a comparison, give you all a comparison. So this year we're on the west side of the OCCC. Most years we're on the south side, and the AB exhibit halls taken together are 475,000 square feet. So you all know, as do I, how long it takes to go back and forth, up and down those aisles, hopefully holding a beer, a cocktail, appetizer, these types of things. But the scope of this attraction is over 1/3 the size of that exhibition hall. Again, in volume, up and down. So it's a big ride. Shout out to the enthusiast community for some of these images, but what I want to talk through is the ride building. So on the left, you see ride rooms on the 1st floor, 1 through 5, and then 9 through 10. So you start at ride system 1, which is the ITS shuttle, the turntable that I just talked about. You conclude with ride system 10, which is the unfortunate moment when you have to get off the ride. And then 4 parts of ride systems that we're going to talk about on the 1st floor. Number 1, again, is that turntable. Number 2 is the trackless motion. Ride system 3A is the elevator component where you go up. And then ride system 4 is the escape sequence on the motion platform on the bottom. So companion drawings on the 2nd floor. You get up to the 2nd floor, you experience ride rooms 6, 7, and 8. You're in this trackless experience. You're fighting against the bad guys. You're trying to escape and have a happy ending. Spoilers ahead, you will have a happy ending. But on the 2nd floor is definitely the feature element of this attraction, why everybody's talking about it. Ride system 3B, which is the free fall, which we're really going to dissect forthcoming. But as an engineer, as an M&S guy, as an Itsec practitioner, I walked in and about this attraction and during the pre-show, and I saw modeling and simulation coming to life everywhere as part of the ride theming. Physical models, movie props, automation, robotics, animatronics, visual simulation aspects. So again, it made me think immediately of LVCA, live, virtual, constructive, and autonomous technologies. So I put a few pictures up there just to kind of show you what I saw, live sets that literally looked like I was on the spaceship in Star Wars. Virtual displays, there's times that during the ride experience, sorry for the spoilers for those of you who haven't been on it, virtual displays, screens that you're looking at to depict some degree of motion, constructive projections. So looking at these panels that if any of you have seen Star Wars, you've seen these sort of battlefield planning panels that look like they're from some futuristic space scenario that made me think of, simulated systems operated by simulated people. And autonomy everywhere. Robotics, animatronics, of course, Star Wars is filled with droids and all these things that lend themselves to these automated or autonomous presentations. So again, incorporated to enhance storytelling. Disney spared no expense to make you believe that you're in this Star Wars thing and make you care about the outcome of this ride experience during. So before we get to the ride proper, I wanted to look with an eye towards M&S on the Attraction FX during the pre-show. So advanced techniques that bring these characters to life. On the top there is an image, on the bottom is a video that I'll soon talk about. The former is a mission briefing from Rey, who's the heroine in the Star Wars sequels. And I kind of knew it when I saw it, but I wanted to learn more about how it worked. It's actually a hologram that's displayed on a screen behind a two-way mirror that cuts directly across the middle of that hologram table. And it's done at an oblique angle to kind of enhance the 3D effect. So it was really neat to see. Again, I knew it was a hologram, but I wanted to know how it worked. Just later on, just before you get in the ride vehicles and start the ride proper, there's a stormtrooper interrogation. The bad guys are interrogating you. And this, I learned, was achieved through something called a Musion effect. Is microphone still working? I think we lost the microphone, so I'm going to just kind of keep shouting. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, I'm going to wing it. So I saw the term Musion effect, and I said, I've got to know what that means. It just sounds like a cool term. But here, as the video tried to show you, were characters that were reflected onto an angled piece of glass from a projected image out of view, but then used projectors with animated shadows as the light sources. So a very clever multi-sensory use of modern-day 4K or 8K display technologies. It's on? Can you hear me? Okay, we're winging it here. I'm going to just hold it. I don't want to risk dropping the microphone. Of these various display technologies to enhance the storytelling, modeling, and simulation coming to life during the pre-show portion of the attraction. Okay, let's dig into the 4 ride systems, starting with ride system 1. And this, I didn't know it then, I know it now. I'm spoiling it for those of you who haven't been on it. I apologize, but you're going to look like the smartest people in line when I tell you about this. It's a turntable simulator. So it starts on the bottom left. You're at the Resistance base. You enter the ITS simulator that I talked about earlier. You're outside. You go in, the doors close, and then subsequently the ITS shuttle takes off. Without knowing it, you spin, you embark on an in-flight battle experience. The bad guys, you encounter them, they're shooting at you, you stop, the tractor beam pulls you in, you're getting pulled towards the Star Destroyer where the bad guys are. So at that time, and that's kind of at the top of the triad that I show there, passengers then unload at this massive indoor hangar in the Star Destroyer. The doors open, you see this thing, you see stormtroopers, it's larger than life. It was unbelievable. As a simulator enthusiast, Star Wars geek, it was incredible. So obviously what they were doing here, I opined at the time, promotes high capacity, promotes operational efficiency, but how the heck did they do that? So how they did it was on a turntable, as this animation kind of shows. And on this slide, I just kind of showed a dissection of that animation with the 3 major segments. So you start here on the lower right, you're outside, you get inside the ITS shuttle. The doors close without you knowing it. It starts spinning. Phase 2 is in the middle of the ride where people are getting off elsewhere and people are getting on elsewhere. And you're kind of getting a mission briefing at that point. You're being told what's happening. Your experience continues. Then you get to phase 3 where you end. Now you're on the spaceship. You're up in space. You're on the Star Destroyer. Like I said, larger than life, unbelievable storytelling, and part 3 of this turntable triad. So here's a few more images that kind of show you what's happening. The ride experience is such that the floor is revolving during the time period that you're in this, but below the perception threshold. So you don't know it's spinning. Obviously, that would kind of defeat the whole purpose in getting you from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. Gentle motion cueing, so you're on this thing, you can kind of feel the... This one? You know what? Can I just have the microphones off and I'm just going to speak? Would that work? Okay. I'd rather... Do we have microphones again? This one? Okay. Let's try this one. So gentle motion cueing, floor vibrations during the battle transition, again, starting you from the ground at the Rebel base all the way up to the Star Destroyer where you're up in space. Take a look at the floor. When you get on this thing, if you don't believe me, you're going to see two seams. So the innermost one is the doorway of the ITS. It opens when you get in, closes when you get out, linear. The outermost one has an obvious curvature to it, and that defines the turntable that you're riding during this experience. So again, I just spoiled it for those of you who haven't been on it, but start a conversation with people in line. You're gonna look like the smartest person. Hey, I designed this thing. We're on a turntable right now. Ride System 2 is trackless longitudinal and lateral motion. This is where you spend most of your time on the Rise of the Resistance experience. Primarily translational ride system that has no physical track. So as soon as I got in the vehicle, I saw that, I noticed it. It's not like a roller coaster. You're untethered to the ground. Employs, we might not be surprised to find out, a system of electronic sensors that are strategically placed throughout the ride's floor. Then a supercomputer uses a large-scale regional positioning system, a GPS if you will, to communicate with each of these 38 passenger vehicles. And the computer obviously instructs these vehicles to follow their ride path as dictated by these floor sensors. So I kind of knew, again, this was coming, but it was really neat to experience it and get a feeling for how it works. Spoiler alert, it's too late now, you're all here, so just kind of look at what it looks like in the ride. You can see the vehicle entering one of the 10 rooms that I alluded to earlier and kind of the motions that you can expect during that experience. There is, once again, no predetermined pathway. There's no track, no channel, no canal, no flume. Instead, the ride follows a virtual path as determined by its programming. So similar to self-driving vehicle technologies, maybe, albeit on a smaller scale, you know, you're within a 6-wall building. As you can see from the video here, planar motion degrees of freedom include forward and back, surge in the X degree of freedom, if you will, lateral side to side, sway in the Y degree of freedom, and planar rotation, ROT-Z, which of course would be yaw. By the way, for those of you who are concerned about maladaptation, simulator sickness, I would rate this ride mild to moderate, not too bad, very family driven. There is some spinning though, just so you're aware. But many advantages of a trackless system over a tracked system in these types of attractions. Number one, safety. Easier to evacuate if you need to. This ride does have quite a bit of downtime, even 3-4 years on, and maintenance as well. Nonlinear pathways, so vehicles can double back. It gives you that sense of excitement. You know, when you enter a big, larger than life room, you can scoot backwards, scoot the other way, and it kind of widens participant field of view, which has native advantages. Unpredictability, and adds that element of randomness to the ride, which is, again, good for the extreme Disney enthusiast community, people who ride this thing tens or hundreds of times. They can be guaranteed, you know, some degree of variability each time they ride. Modularity, we've got 4 ride systems working together, so it's more convenient without a track to hybridize these ride sequences. Immersion, it supports real-world authenticity. Misdirection, which is so important in a movie and a game, a thrill ride, of course, when you make somebody feel like they're gonna zig and then they actually zag. It's of course very thrilling. And future potential, looking ahead. Again, one of our purposes, one of our themes this year at Itsec, but this is versatile and I would argue adaptable technology. So right now it's just flat ground, planar implementations, but maybe in the future we can do hill climbing with these types of technologies, and then even looking beyond, thinking about 3D motion, you know, levitation even. If there's anything I've learned from my years at Itsec, it's that what's science fiction today is science fact tomorrow. Back with the theme of M&S, this time mid-show during the ride, the storytelling element continues. So advanced M&S character techniques. Kylo Ren is kind of the modern day Darth Vader for those of you who don't know. And there's a really interesting M&S effect that happens mid-ride where he's marching towards you, he pulls out his lightsaber and you start to think, uh-oh, I'm his next victim. Again, good guys always win, so we escape. But Neat to see with patent imagery on Google how this was done. So Kylo was projected onto a thin vertical flat screen mounted on a forward translating sled that slides along a track, all that's outside of your field of view when you're inside your trackless motion ride vehicle, synchronized with this ultra short throw projector, 4K, 8K, whatever it might be, that creates that moving visual illusion as he's coming towards you. But then I think he kind of jumps on your car and he's above you, so the thrills don't stop there. So there's a lightsaber effect that comes through the floor. So you're looking above, you see this lightsaber, and the drive arm, this slotted arm that you can see a patent of here, pushes the lightsaber through a slotted disc, which you can kind of see on that rightmost bottom image, creating this cutting effect when viewed from below. So again, mapping that with other projection, display technologies, smoke, reflections, the glowing effect and these types of things really helps to sell that joint effect. Okay, moving on, ride system 3A, and this is the elevator lift system. So as I alluded to earlier, at one point during the ride, and I didn't know this was coming, although I should have, you go up. So you kind of enter this room, you see these massive AT-AT walkers, these four-legged creatures that you see in the lower middle image. Any of you who saw Empire Strikes Back on the snow planet, these were those big kind of marching robots towards the rebel base that the good guys, of course, won. But you enter this room, you see these massive walkers, and then you approach this kind of slot, this doorway that happens to be an elevator. There's two of them, Alpha and Bravo. Obviously, this is the transition mechanism between floor number 1 and floor number 2. Highlighted in these figures, on the rightmost figure, you can almost even see the cables that pull that elevator system up. It must be about 15 feet or so. But the spoilers continue. That video on the top right-hand corner kind of shows you exiting the AT-AT room up to the second level, where the action continues in your trackless ride vehicle. Again, there's dual lifts, so there is some degree of redundancy in the system. Alpha and Bravo, as they were shown in the patent images that are available online. And there your battle continues in the Star Destroyer hallways. But again, take a note of the tightly coupled and technologically advanced ride systems at play here. And this ride, being as advanced as it is, there's a lot of downtime, because if any of these systems go down, the whole attraction goes down. Now, there is some redundancy embedded, so I thought it was interesting that I found in the lower right-hand corner there, an enthusiast was on the ride when one of the two elevators was out of order. So he took a picture of that. Of course, the ride can still continue when one of the two elevators is functional, but what does that mean? That probably means your 1 hour wait just turned into a 2 hour wait when the capacity of the ride is cut in half. So this is a nice segue into ride system 3B, which this video shows here while I'm harping. It's the finale, it leans towards the finale of the ride, easily the most impressive and exciting portion of the ride, that of course being the drop system finale that brings you back to the first floor from the second floor. The elevator, again, in System 3A transferred the action up to the second floor. Trackless motion takes passengers to their escape pods, which are shown in the top right there. And there's 4 of those. Charlie Delta Echo Foxtrot, as they're known, again, towards egress, towards the final ride sequence. So Imagineers did this by mounting the trackless ride vehicle upon a motion base, a hexapod, a Stewart platform, if you will, which is our 4th ride system forthcoming, which itself is attached to this free fall tower that video just showed you. So a few more animations on the next slide to show you how this effect was achieved. Video on the top right, and then a sequence of images on the bottom here. It's really neat. You enter this escape pod, you look across the way, and you visually see these pods dropping, which is kind of a hint to you, I think we're about to lose our stomach. And that's exactly what happened. You lose your stomach, the video's massive screen in front of you, curved screen in front of you, and then the action continues into ride system number 4. Begins on level 2, ends on level 1, and again their space voyage continues to get the ride system back to the ground where you started on that planet Batu. So finally, ride system number 4, six-off motion-based immersive theater, not unlike the Smuggler's Run attraction that we talked about earlier, and that was really my whole purpose in telling you about that, was a precursor to this ride, this ride sequence, which indeed is very similar. So right after the drop sequence, without any gap in the motion whatsoever, in the storytelling whatsoever, the ride experience continues as a more conventional six-off motion simulator. Again, a nice transitionary mechanism from the Star Destroyer. Remember, you're up in space as part of the story in the virtual realm, back to Planet Batuu on the ground, where you're more in the live and physical realm, if you will. And this sequence is just enough. It's about 20 or 25 sequence that kind of draws the simulator portion of the ride to its untimely finale. Again, very similar to Smuggler's Run that we talked about earlier. But this video on the lower left shows you most of the duration of that experience. Again, you've just escaped the bad guy's spaceship. You're going back to the planet in this crash landing, but hoping for a positive outcome. And there you see you kind of come back to Earth. This hyperactive animation was the best one I could find in the middle of the slide. The point being, you're experiencing that hexapod sixed-off motion as this video sequence comes to a close. Again, returning to the planet on these short-range evacuation vehicles, a prototype model of the vehicle that you're supposedly within is shown on the bottom right of this slide. End of the flight sequence brings you back to the planet where you started. The good guys win. Seamless ride theming transitions, again, from virtual in the sixed-off hexapod to planar trackless motion for a brief segment that brings you back outside, back to the live sets and the physical props in the unload area that kind of looks like the planet where you started your whole experience. Okay, quick aside here. This was an interesting bit of trivia that I found in my literature travels. Disney has been sued. So the Raven Sun Creative, or the RSC lawsuit or dispute, if you want to learn more, check it out. I did supply references here if you want to take a deeper dive, from the former creative director at Universal Studios, who is alleging continued patent infringement with respect to the marquee element on this ride, which of course was the free fall segment. So Disney uses the RSC patented synchronization of screen video along with a vertical moving ride vehicle. But if you look back a decade now, 2014, there is a tower ride patent concept. I found it online, did a Google search for what has become known as their Ultra Tower concept. So if you take a look at some of these, there's a video, renderings. I looked at this and I thought back to what I experienced, and I thought, yeah, there's a little bit of technological overlap, some functional similarities going on here. So let's let the lawyers figure this out. But from what you can see from the Ultra Tower concept, a programmable sixed-off motion base along with a variable high-speed drop tower capable of motion up and down, so sustaining positive and negative G-forces. I thought this was fascinating, interesting. I did a quick search last night as I was rehearsing this tutorial one last time to see if there's been an outcome here, and I didn't identify one. So I assume there's a settlement forthcoming. Stay tuned, we'll have to see what becomes of this. So the ride experience is over, but rest assured, the experience of pulling your wallet is not over, because the M&S aspects, particularly at Disney, continue up to and beyond the conclusion of this attraction. So go get some attractions. If you saw Star Wars, you might remember, Luke Skywalker drinking his blue milk. It's called Bantha milk. Quick hint to all of you, indoors, it's just like a snow cone. I was disappointed, like a $20 snow cone. But outside, they sell spiked versions of Bantha milk. If you're of age, I can't encourage it enough. You can build your own lightsaber. So hey, for $250, a low cost $250, you can have your own custom lightsaber. If you've got 4 grandkids, you'll easily drop $1,000 without issue. But theming everywhere around, in and around this attraction, physical life-size models, props, outdoors, conclude your ride experience. As a Star Wars nut and as a simulator enthusiast, I was pleased. In my travels, I said earlier, the Disney enthusiast community, incredible. And I found a particular enthusiast who I wanted to give a shout out to, who designed a game simulator, a full game simulator of Rise of the Resistance. So as modeling and simulation practitioners, enthusiasts, I thought you'd find value in this too. He used Procreate as his model. He used JavaScript and HTML5 as his simulation tools. An ideal resource, I would argue, and as I'll soon show you a little bit deeper, to observe the inner layout of the ride, which we kind of walked through today, but also seeing critically the interoperations of the ride elements and the queue experience, which is really what I wondered as I walked through this entire ride experience from point A to point B. Those white dots that you see there, by the way, are people, so you can it's hypnotizing to watch this, but you can kind of see the entire experience, M&S, come to life. In companion with that, here's an image. I apologize, it's a little bit grainy, but kind of a helicopter view of the entire Rise of the Resistance, the entrance lower left, the queuing area that you enter immediately pre-show, into the ITS, the turntable element that's still partially outside, the exit of the ride that's on the other side of that without you knowing it, guided by theming and trees and things, and then that 175,000 square foot show building that I talked about earlier. But this simulator shows you the inner workings of this entire experience, end to end. Obviously, it's a model and an accompanying simulation. It's all parameterizable. So, you can wait 2 hours or more to get on this ride, and none of us probably want to sit there in front of our computers and stare at this for 2 hours. So, of course, you can set time as a variable, other factors, time of day, wait times, and just kind of hypnotize yourself watching this thing. So I think there's a brief video here kind of showing you a portion of the various ride elements as part of this video here, showing you 1, 2, 3, and 4 that we kind of featured and talked through today. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to check this out and play with it on your own time. Okay, winding down, we're doing actually pretty good on time here. I want to come back and really kind of explore that link, that coupling that I talked about at the onset as being one of our primary objectives in talking through things today. So now that we know what Rise of the Resistance is, and that it's a marquee attraction with these seamless ride features and these 4 primary elements that make it the attraction that it is, how can we maybe look ahead and forecast? One of our missions here at Itsec, of course, how these types of technologies are or may be used in future applications that perhaps have a more serious-minded training application. So that turntable, where I was moving without knowing it, moving through various phases of the ride experience, made me think about boundless planar egress or omnidirectional motion. So many applications that I can think of course, we're going to be going on the exhibition floor later today and throughout the week for large-scale battlefield warfighter training using virtual reality. And this is one of the weaknesses maybe of VR, pure VR, where you put the goggles on and the world that you're in is 100% virtual, is that oftentimes we reach the end of the world, or we're bumping into things, or we're bumping into other people. So there is patent technology out there that I identified as part of my literature review that shows moving floors with full degree of freedom of continuous movement, perhaps in concert with boots or shoes, specialized shoes that you have to wear on these floors, reduce risk of walking into obstacles, walking over the edge of the world, walking into other participants, floor tiles as per the patent imagery, ratchet, or as the patent advertises, there's an inchworming technology to try to better control user movements. Similar technologies as identified in the patent used rotating discs or even magnets with these types of haptic floor systems that use plate assemblies for high pass vibrations. So again, that was part of the experience that I recall on the turntable, feeling those vibrations kind of rotating as though you're going from the ground into space, giving it that sense of realism, that sense of presence that I'm actually in a place where I'm truly not. So I did see these various patent images and think that there were parallels between how Rise of the Resistance did it and how we may be doing it in these types of future implementations. Ride System 2, again, was that trackless motion. It made me think immediately of path planning, autonomous path planning. Many of you might have seen or will soon see this acronym called SLAM, which stands for Simultaneous Localization and Mapping. Many applications that I would argue are extremely relevant and timely to the modeling and simulation community. One example would be mapping unknown terrain and environments. I just came from a transportation tutorial thinking about the potential applications, current and future, with regards to connected and autonomous vehicles, but also thinking about potential applications in our living rooms. So if you're lazy like me and you have a Roomba because you don't want to vacuum your carpet, it's neat to kind of watch these things and figure out how they do their path planning. Military applications, perhaps surveying hostile territory in battlefields, ordnance recognition, and these types of things. Obviously incorporates several core technologies that are fundamental to Itsec, looking at automated motion like LiDAR, infrared, using sensors for obstacle avoidance. These are key areas now and in recent years and certainly in the future, but also putting my optimization hat back on from my early training, thinking about like the traveling salesman analogy where these autonomous systems are trying to do their job efficiently and effectively, using algorithms like depth first, greedy, or even spiral motion, as is the case with a Roomba, for example. Potential drawbacks that would need to be further thought through, particularly in military or battlefield deployment. Sensors transmit energy, can be detectable. Obviously, that's never a good thing. And these automated technologies that we're seeing so much of, they're getting better, they're getting smarter, but in many instances in these, on these battlefields, they're never as good as a living, breathing, autonomous, live human being. Ride system number 3, the elevator / freefall system. Again, that's what I would consider to be kind of the marquee element of this attraction, where what we saw was enhanced G-force simulation. So many applications that I can surmise with large amplitude vehicles. Back in Buffalo, I operate a driving simulator. So we do driving studies. Oftentimes with those types of studies, we don't use the heave degree of freedom much. We don't have to go up and down. Maybe if you're going up a hill, you're on uneven terrain. Maybe if you strike a curb or a speed bump, you've got a little bit of excitation in the vertical direction. Similarly with many flight applications, where you're studying a pilot at altitude, you don't have to worry about the heave degree of freedom in an extreme case. But in other situations where perhaps maximum fidelity performance replication is required for training, you may need these types of features. For example, you want to more closely replicate an entire flight envelope. If you're thinking about takeoffs or approach scenarios or landings where you want to give the pilot that true sense of actually doing these motions, perhaps in adverse conditions with turbulence, ground level shear and these types of things, you might need these enhanced characteristics. So I didn't know this going into my literature review, and as a simulator guy, I'm partially embarrassed to admit that. But NASA Ames has a VMS, a vertical motion simulator that has extensive operational limits, to say the least. 60 feet of vertical travel in this simulator. By comparison, we have a small 6-DOF hexapod in Buffalo that I just mentioned, 18 inches of vertical travel, 1.5 feet. So this gives you a sense of the comparative sense of scale and scope, but also which features a 40-foot lateral travel on a full motion cab. So need to see this, see some of the statistics. As an engineer, I'm always interested in these things. An image kind of showing what it looks like behind the scenes. But other future applications, simulated vehicles, obviously supersonic X-planes where speed, accuracy is essential for serious-minded training. A few years ago, I did a tutorial on looking ahead, surmising the future of advanced air mobility as it's been coined by NASA. VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, short takeoff and landing vehicles, casually known as flying cars, that technologists are telling us we might see in the next 3, 5, 10 years. I could certainly see situations where large heave degree of freedom, so-called vertical motion simulators might be required for these types of applications. Lastly, ride system number 4, more of a classical hexapod-based experience, but also encompassed and enveloped in this spherical immersion system. So it made me immediately think of the types of technologies we're going to see that are so pervasive on our exhibition floor throughout the week. 180 degree, 270 degree, or even 360 degree contiguous projection systems. I've seen in my literature review and can see how this would be essential and adaptable for fast jet training, F-15, F-16, T-50, where your vehicle motion demands more rapid, more precise visuals with low smear, 4K, 8K projection, the types of things that in a ground simulator going 50, 60, 70 miles per hour, from a visual, from a display system perspective, we're not so concerned with. That which demands full field of view, ultra high resolution, high contrast. Of course, when we walk out on the showroom floor throughout the week here, we're going to see the bleeding edge technologies in these various areas. But these types of systems and implementations have advantages. These curved displays, significantly improved scene realism, more engagement when you're enveloped by the entire system. Of course, you're more engaged. Better recognition of targets and detail, which of course in military implementations is so critical and can ultimately lead to more effective training. Okay, future preview. Got a few minutes. I think we're doing great on time, which is nice to see. But again, kind of our final mission in coming here at Itsec every year is forecasting. What do we learn now? What's the state of the art today in various areas of modeling and simulation? But how do we then go off to our back home, our own vocations, and figure out the path forward towards the future? So looking at some of these hot technologies that have been so pervasive the past few years at Itsec, of course this year will be no exception to that. XR, so-called extended realities, cross realities. Check out some of these technologies when you're on the exhibition floors, these headsets that place riders in a virtual world that corresponds to the movements of the attraction. Of course, advantages here, it's more compact, it's more portable, perhaps less reliant on physical screens, big show buildings that are so commonplace in many simulator attractions. Machine learning, thinking about enabling recommendations of content and user experience. UX, another kind of popular buzz term that you're going to be seeing lots of here at Itsec 2023, more precisely, more geared towards individual preferences as we go in amusement parks, as we go on specific ride attractions. Information gleaned and based upon observed individual user behaviors, patterns, trends. Of course, with our watches, our phones and things, we're being watched by our big brother, which is bad news, but maybe good news in that they can tune our experiences better. Artificial intelligence, robotics that mimic human attention behavior and perhaps react even to environmental stimuli for more authentic, immersive, repeatable, interactive, and maybe very important coming off of the COVID-19 pandemic the last few years, more contactless experiences in these rides and attractions. So as part of my preparation for building this tutorial, I combed the literature, and many of these patents are out there for you to see kind of what Disney is thinking now, or what Universal is thinking about now or the past few years, some of which we end up seeing manifest in later years. So a few of these patents I thought were interesting and really pertained to where I think things are going with relation to some of these, so-called hot technologies, but just a few ideas that I'll present here now. Dynamic adjustment of ride pathways. We talked about it on Rise of the Resistance. There is some degree of open-endedness on that ride, but maybe based more on human reactions, human factors human emotions. So if you're putting a child on a simulator and you can see they're scared or they're crying, maybe in real time we can tone it down. Or maybe if you get a cluster of teenagers on the ride who have their arms raised, give me more, give me more. You know, you can tune it up and give them a more thrilling experience. There's no reason to think why things aren't going in that direction. Related to that, with simulators, I think many of us are in the business. We know that the major demerit is always maladaptation, motion sickness, simulator sickness. It's still a big deal on these rides, despite the fact that these technologies have advanced. The coupling between motion and visuals has gotten better. You know, people are blowing fresh air on you when you're on these rides. Basic mitigation measures, keeping it cool in the ride room. But machine learning, neural networks can perhaps make these ride experiences better and make simulators better for more serious-minded training applications. Talked earlier about Musion and holography. Found some patent images of a Pepper's Ghost, which is enabling dynamic illusions along with a moving simulator vehicle. So some of these things that we talked about earlier that were implemented to great effect during the pre-show experience on Rise of the Resistance, I think we're only going to see more of that, more pre-show, more storytelling, you know, enhancing the end-to-end ride experience. Pepper's Ghost, I think, by the way, is an effect that's done on the Tower of Terror attraction, where you look in these rooms when you're on this crazy elevator and you're seeing effects that aren't actually there during your motion experience. So various patents out there that talk about this. Finally, the big buzz term, the metaverse, where physical and digital worlds converge. I think you probably heard about that in this morning's great gaming tutorial. Thinking about wearables, smartphones, immersing guests in more personalized experiences. I talked about this earlier. I think, again, we're going to be seeing more of this, and patent imagery out there is certainly telling of how these technologies can take us to the next level. Okay, doing really good on time. What I sought to achieve with this tutorial was to really talk about modeling and simulation, but in a way that would allow us to look at the anatomy and decomposition of this ride system attraction that I think 4 years ago when it was introduced and still to this day can be considered one of, if not the best in show in the entertainment industry. We wanted to be mindful of its history and its origins. The Link simulator, almost a century ago, revolutionized flight training, as we saw from its patent that is still publicly available. There's a native link between training and entertainment. That device was co-patented all those years ago as an amusement device. So even then, before there was M&S, before there was Itsec, I think there was a recognition of how these fields can and will, with great effectiveness, go hand in hand. M&S remains an essential tool for modern day thrill rides. I tried as best I could to show you behind the scenes, behind the screams of how it was done on this attraction. Native synergy between serious play and real-world LVC. I tried to show some examples, really emphasize that element of storytelling that is so important in the movies, obviously, when you're truly telling a story, but when you're doing training or you're building a ride simulator where you want the participants to be engaged, you want them to care about the outcomes, this is absolutely essential. So really in this tutorial, we took a deep dive, again, behind the screens, looking at that turntable, looking at the trackless motion, looking at the elevator and free fall systems that worked kind of in tandem, and that sixed-off immersive curved screen experience that culminated the ride, how seamlessly these work together, and how they could perhaps be extended to modern-day training technologies. Hopefully I can say I'm confirming our learning objectives that we defined at the onset, again describing the Link trainer and its lasting contributions, recognizing the link between these various training communities, looking at park experience again to optimize thrills and efficiency, a theme that we talked about throughout today that is essential for any simulator that you might build, looking specifically at some of these M&S nuances with this state-of-the-art ride attraction, But again, as we all walk out the door, evaluating future opportunities to sustain and expand ride technologies in an increasingly digital world and in various business sectors from where we all hail. Real quick acknowledgments of a few communities of interest that, whether they know it or not, helped me build this tutorial. Thrill ride connoisseurs, many technical aspects that were fairly easy to identify online, but in particular, the Disney enthusiast community. These people are crazy lunatics. And I mean that in the best sense of the word. They have done their homework in a way that I thought I was a crazy lunatic, and these people put me to shame. So I borrowed a lot of their reference material, which I tried to appropriately cite throughout, and made my job so much easier. Last but not least, Charles Bartel, my colleague, my friend, recently retired, but he was an early proponent of motion systems in the entertainment industry. And I only learned this towards his retirement. He was talking about this back in the 1970s. And towards the end of his career, he really focused applications in motion simulation for education, for STEM training, for teacher training. He was involved with the Monday night program here at Itsec, so he was a huge inspiration for me putting this tutorial together. This was a labor of love. I couldn't wait to get back to my computer after I rode this attraction a year ago and start learning about it, and it was soon thereafter that I thought, hey, maybe I can make a tutorial out of this and bring some benefit and value and professional development to the Itsec community. I try to do a comprehensive bibliography. Again, you'll all have digital access to this and every tutorial that comprises our program this year. Tried to give credit where credit was due everywhere I could. It was a lot of fun, it was a lot of work, and it was great, nerve-wracking, but great to come here today. You know, dealing with multiple microphones, feedback, cameras in the room everywhere. I'm sweating profusely, but I hope I did my job in teaching you all something today and passing along some knowledge for broad benefit. I'm almost done talking. 2 tutorials in a row. It sounded like a good idea in February. Never again, never again. But it's been great. Hey, my job here at Itsec is over, and now I can just sit back and for the most part, enjoy the conference. My name is Kevin Hume from the University at Buffalo. Here's my phone number, my email address. I had so much fun doing this. Thank you all for your time, for your attention today, and I'll answer any questions or comments you may have. Thanks again. Questions? Yes, this gentleman here was first, I think.
I was going to ask if you're familiar with Runaway Railway, the Mickey Mouse ride at Hollywood Studios?
No, I'm not, but I soon will be, because my daughter, who's going to turn 3 tomorrow, is going to get me on that ride. But tell me more. I'm already interested.
So it's the same trackless ride system as the Road to Resistance, but the whole set is like a cartoon. But if you watch Google pictures of what it looks like with the projectors off, it's all just white walls in a warehouse. And so the reason I bring it up is because it seems like it's a way that you could change your simulated environment very easily without having to have huge sets built with just a small portion of it being a screen.
Absolutely. I think many ride simulators fall into that category. As you appropriately said, a room with white walls when you turn the projectors off. One of the first ones that I rode, because it was partially designed by Moog, who I'm in cahoots with, was the Spider-Man attraction at Universal Studios, which is the same basic idea. That, however, has tracked ride vehicles. So I didn't know about this one you mentioned, and you've piqued my curiosity. But absolutely, I tried to end this presentation surmising how we can take what we've done well and do it even better. And the thought that you've put forth, I think, is right in line with that. Yes?
In extension of that question, the ride with Remy and Ratatouille and Epcot is also using the same kind of technologies to get that impression. But my question is that once these technologies are used towards
Sure, it's a good point. I mean, I think in the entertainment industry, that's what most people look for, is they kind of want to know what they're getting. But if you adapt these technologies more for military applications, you want that degree of unpredictability. So they're not experiencing the same thing over and over again. So they don't necessarily know what's coming. By the way, I've heard that Ratatouille ride is a motion sickness no-no, so I think I'm going to be avoiding that one. But to your point, I think this is where a lot of the so-called modern technologies are going to be critical, so that your training environment that you present your trainees is such that it's adaptable, it's changeable, it's unpredictable. You're not going to get the same training experience each time, even if you have some degree of physical screens or locked projectors that can't be moved in space. But that's where I think machine learning, AI, some of these game engines, wearable, portable visuals with these cross realities is perhaps going to be more effective in these more serious-minded training applications. Yes? Sure, I think storytelling takes on two different meanings depending on the application. And with Star Wars, it's easy because you're building a ride attraction that already has a story, it already has a mythology, so it sort of sells itself. You just put props here and effects there, and by the time you get to the ride vehicle, you've seen Star Wars, you're enhanced, you want to live it, experience it, and that step is really easy. But in more serious-minded training contexts, I think storytelling takes on a different meaning. If it's a flight training application, you don't want to put theming in the entranceway that looks like Top Gun to, because then it doesn't feel real anymore. I think storytelling in that context means, and this is often difficult to achieve in what I do in more driving contexts, a lot of times young kids will get on a simulator and they know it's fake. They know it's artificial, and they're trying to show off to their buddies, hey, I'm going to try to go fast, I'm going to try to spin out. They don't take it seriously. And I would say the parallel in more serious-minded training, let's say for driver or pilot applications, would be just that your simulator has enough fidelity such that, hey, they might get on and know it's a trainer, but if you're doing your job at implementing that simulator, they get 5 minutes into their training and they've forgotten that they're in a simulator. They're trying hard to do well. They're not treating it casually like it's a game or like it's an artificial environment. They want to do well. Whatever their training objectives might be in that simulator, they're handling it in a way that's like real life. So to me, that would be the parallel to quote-unquote storytelling in more serious-minded training applications. Great comments, great questions. Any others? Yes.
In your work in the entertainment area, did you pick up on any data collection and analysis techniques that are, who does this better than, Universal or Disney in terms of data? What did you see in that regard, if anything, and how does that relate to what you see in military simulation?
First of all, I'm not a subject matter expert. I'm in the field of transportation. I am interested in this and do it just because I've always loved it. I've always kind of been interested in these things. So I don't really have a frame of reference for what you mentioned. It makes me think, though, of maladaptation, which is a common problem across both implementations. So your question kind of made me wonder aloud, are Disney and Universal and these other entities examining this problem in real time? Are they just looking at the trash cans at the end of the ride to see how well they're doing things, or are there analytics behind the scenes where they're trying to figure out what is and what is not making people sick? I mentioned Mission Space earlier, by the way, for those of you, quick bit of trivia on this very point. When it opened, it was only the so-called orange version of the ride, which is the centrifuge, and they had a massive problem with motion sickness. You know, Disney's supposed to be a family place, but of course, they've got to stay competitive with all these other parks, and they had a huge problem on their hands. So to this day, they've now implemented the so-called green version of the ride, which moves and vibrates and tilts a little bit, but you're not in a centrifuge, you're not spinning. So if you ever wondered what the true difference behind those implementations was, that's the difference. And I keep wanting to try orange, but I haven't built up the courage. But to your question, that's where I kind of wonder where maybe, and especially across both industries, where analytics would be useful. The many elements, factors, variables that go into building a simulator-based experience, how can we make them better so they're more adaptive for a greater percentage of our population? Yes?
So it's increasingly important in the gaming industry to provide the opportunity for competition against others, such as sports on course and so on, to create a different user experience each time. Yet the entertainment industry, the attraction repeatability, and providing consistency in the high quality experiences is important, particularly from a commercialized element. So how long do you think it is before we start to see a connection of ride simulators to allow users to perhaps compete against one another? And do you think this would encourage engagement or deter it? So for example, the 14-acre site that you cited, the idea that all rides could be connected at the same time.
Sure. I think the interactivity that you mentioned is already being done. I must confess I'm not quite the enthusiast that I was when I was younger, but some of these rides, attractions, simulator implementations are already promoting, where you're sort of having friendly battles, interactions between each other. So I think that is already being done, and I do think, just my opinion, semi-educated opinion, that we're going to be seeing much more of that in these types of ride attractions. I can't cite any rides specifically, but I have seen and heard images of people kind of, you know, I think maybe even more off-ride. So you're sort of being playful with people on the ride while you're off the ride, and I can see obvious extensions to that for, you know, engaging in interactive experiences while both parties are on the attraction. Any other questions, comments? Yes?
I was just thinking, have you thought about or have you heard about them wondering about the vulnerability of having these rides that aren't on physical tracks? Maybe somebody hacked it in and slammed these things in?
It's an interesting point. You'd have to think that these cyber hacks have something better to do, but then society always proves us otherwise. You know, with autonomous vehicles, that's a big concern. People just, and it comes down to this whole issue of trust. You know, trust in autonomy. It's a big deal right now with autonomous cars. It's a great point. I would have to believe that's a major concern when you've got these trackless systems like Rise of the Resistance, largely governed by a computer. Who's to say that it couldn't be hacked? Who's to say that some lunatic, in the worst sense of the word, you know, would jump in and try to do something untoward in these implementations? So I do think it's something that has to be thought through, and ways need to be found to minimize, mitigate that possibility. Great question. All good questions.
So we're out of time, but hopefully Kevin can stick around for a few minutes. Please consider filling out the feedback form online or a paper version, and Sue's going to be collecting them in the back, and I'm going to be collecting them in the front. The third and final tutorial presentation in this track today will be at 12:45. Dr. Sue Newmark will be presenting Putting the When and Where into Simulations. So I hope you can join us for that. Thanks for attending.
Thank you.